Nevada will be a big test for Pete Buttigieg as he tries to win over black and Latino voters there. NBC News road warrior Vaughn Hillyard's in Nevada, where the Buttigieg campaign hosted events in 3 different cities today.
Allison, we're 5 days away from the Nevada primary. Pete Buttigieg came out in the top 2 in Iowa and then in New Hampshire. His campaign really wanted this to be a binary choice between Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg at this point. But when you look here in Nevada, Joe Biden is still around, Elizabeth Warren is still around, Amy Klobuchar is still around. Pete Buttigieg just wrapped up an event here in Carson City, Nevada. This is his second of 3 events here on the day in the Silver State. He will also hold the campaign rally over in Salt Lake City, Utah, one of those several Super Tuesday states to take place 15 days from now on March 3rd. When you're looking at this from the Buttigieg campaign standpoint, this is their moment to prove themselves. You know, you can talk about California or Texas and the diverse demographics there. You can look at South Carolina and talk about the black electorate. But here in Nevada, just half of the Democratic electorate expected to turn out are white voters. You have about 25% Latinos, and then a significant share of not only African Americans, Asian Americans. This is the moment that the Buttigieg campaign has set itself up for. And now, frankly, what Saturday will tell us at that Nevada caucus is, frankly, whether they have the ability and the capacity to bring over a decent share of support from communities of color, communities that are imperative to expanding his base of support. You know, when you're looking at the Buttigieg operation, they put most of their resources, Allison, into Iowa, into New Hampshire, and they frankly don't quite have the means to be able to run the type of robust operation that Michael Bloomberg is able to just funnel money into. When you're talking to voters, Michael Bloomberg's name consistently pops up, not here just in Nevada, but we were in Sacramento on Friday. When you talk to voters out in Arizona, because they're seeing his name constantly on television advertisements. Over the course of this campaign here in Nevada, just about $1.2 million the Buttigieg campaign will have invested into this state. You know, that's not that large scale of money. We should note they have about 100 organizers presently on the ground to try to rally folks here across Nevada. But when you're looking at these operations right now, Bernie Sanders appears, according to at least polling, to be in the lead here. A lot of it comes down to what can these campaigns pull off here over the next 5 days. Pete Buttigieg is contesting on 2 fronts in the television ads that he is running and on similar stages behind me is, one, that he is a candidate who supports this idea of a public option, Medicare for all who want it, he calls it. Of course, there's a lot of debate back and forth between the economics and over the viability of such a plan that Medicare for all in terms of its cost effectiveness compared to this idea of a public option. But the other front you hear is the same message that Pete Buttigieg ran with in Iowa and New Hampshire. This idea that he can win over independents and Republicans. Take into account, Hillary Clinton, yes, she won Nevada, but won it by just 26,000 votes, 2 percentage points. And so this is an electorate that is still very much looking at which candidate is best equipped to pull over those more moderate voters. And Pete Buttigieg is suggesting that he's the one to do it. And that's why you're hearing him stick with that message that he had in Iowa and New Hampshire, while also talking in a greater way about his connection with more diverse communities, saying he understands that politics is personal. And he said that it's important to understand communities of color through his own experience in South Bend, a diverse community of 100,000 folks, saying that when he first became mayor of South Bend, that he looked at things more through the mindset of as being a data guy, that how do you dot the I's and cross the T's? And he said he realized over the course of his mayoralship that it was about listening to stories and understanding the broader impact that communities of color impact, perhaps that he had not even experienced himself. Those are the types of conversations that he is trying to take place, not only here in Nevada because of its importance on Saturday, but knowing that just 6 days later comes South Carolina, and just a week and a half after that, you have Super Tuesday, the states of California, Texas, Virginia, Utah, Alabama. These are a big 2 weeks ahead for Pete Buttigieg, and he and his campaign wholly realize that, Allison.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.